All right. Now, what was the question one more time?
I don't know. I feel so relaxed.
In his red herrings, was that it?
Yeah, we're talking about red herrings.
I'm particularly moved by the testimony of that Kathy O'Brien lady who said who warned that they would be shoving aliens down our throat, and that when we saw that happen, it was like a power grab of some sort.
Yeah.
So is this a Project Bluebeam, but like the narrative version of it?
Well, I'll tell you. Let me tell you another anecdote. I'm gonna pretend to be Eric in this situation. I'm never gonna answer your question directly. I'm always gonna respond with a story that maybe vaguely points to something that you're talking about. So when I was talking to Eric, he had this narrative where he doesn't push it so hard anymore. He would talk about the twin nuclei problem. He mentions it very briefly with Joe, but he used to really dig into it, which is that our understanding of the nucleus of the atom and the cell has given us enormous power that we can't manage well. And so now we're going to destroy ourselves. And so we have to escape. And how are we going to escape? Well, we're going to do this technological advancement thing. But I always said to him, I said, Eric, yes, there's two, but there's a third center that we've discovered that we really began to dig into since the 1950s that you never mention. And that's the center of the mind. That's the center of belief. And the ability to shape a narrative such that what we're really constructing is fences around what it is you're even possible to think or see.
Yeah.
And so that the true labor of love that's been going on in the background has been the management of this third center, this unnamed center, this capacity to influence what you believe. Because as long as I can influence what you believe, I don't care what else is going on in the world. And if I can stick you in a matrix, or if I can stick you in a narrative that doesn't even require hardware, it's pure software, it's pure bullshit artistry that I can spin up in 4 hours of endless speech.
Here, have some beautiful axiomatic presuppositions to build your cage with.
Yeah.
Gavin, say some words for a little bit, would you? I don't care what they are. I just want to hear your voice.
I'm glad to be here, virtually not alone. I'm glad I have a voice. If I were just listening to Joe Rogan and Eric Weinstein, I would not have a voice. That's why I only listened for 15 minutes before I determined that the spirit was wrong and I couldn't stand it anymore. So I'm glad to hear what everyone else went out and brought back from that conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Chris, you want to weigh in again since you're sabotaging your career to be here?
He's the boss.
I'm watching them. They're working.
So you can get a drone to do that.
Yeah, I have a drone actually.
You can get a drone that's like 30 miles. You can take it 30 miles to go peek on your employer.
I like that.
There's people who do it.
Oh man, Big Brother. I mean, okay, so I mean, 4 hours of spinning a yarn. You know, and the idea is that it's just total BS. Like, then I would just kind of pose the question back to you, me. In other words, to myself and to the audience of, well, then what's the ultimate goal? Why are we like, what? Sure, to build a narrative for people, a trap for people to fall into. What, like, it seemed to me more like he was trying to get his time machine built, and it felt more like he was trying. Part of it was about himself, but then the other part of it was about legitimately trying to like feel like his scientific discoveries needed to get pushed forward for the good of humanity. You kind of reject that, me?
I don't reject it utterly, because part of what Eric is doing is speaking so many true threads that we can't help but acknowledge there is a spirit of the desire for humanity to succeed, to innovate, to thrive. Right. That's all in there for sure. and it's needed to hear these things. But there's another element of it, which is if Eric truly believed in what he was saying, he would perform actions far different than what he's doing. If he truly believed in his own project, he would have engaged in it in a different way. Now, I'm saying that partly from personal direct experience with him in the way that he was engaging with his outreach and directly with this project of attempting to work on his theory. Right, I was directing teams of people to help him unpack what he was working on, but he had no real interest in supporting that project. What he was more interested in was finding a narrative that he could organize a bunch of young men around, that he could then activate politically. And I'll tell you, when he came into the Discord just before the January 6th events took place, his narrative had nothing to do with science or getting off the planet. It was a drunken rant about how it is all of the young men should be in the streets causing riots and attacking their political leaders because everyone was ridiculous and no one had the answer. He was so drunk he dropped his glass off the table. We heard it shatter on the floor, slurring his words, trying to apologize for it. At the same time, it sounded like his wife or somebody came in to try to clean it up. It was a phenomenal experience. So I'm speaking, I guess again from some private knowledge, experiencing Eric from a different angle. I could say some other things about Lex Friedman too, but
is this type of insider trading, like trying to capture a narrative? I think that's why the title of the stream makes sense. This remote viewing of Intergalactic Elephant. Like we want to. It's all exactly the same thing. As we're going to try to, and it can't like because I don't want to talk about this narrative idea as like a bullshit idea either, because I think like this is real. This is what we've been experiencing at a very high level over the last, at least in the very apparent to us in the last few years. It's like, here, look at this, and then look at this, and then now, and so we got like this. Somebody's trying to capture the flag, and so like even when like Vervaeke says we're going to steal the culture, that's another way of doing this type of thing. And I think his project is to try to dispel with the bullshit. But you have to have some bullshit sprinkled in all of this. I think is a triangulating thing that's happening. Because I think one of the problems we have is we've kind of discredited mystical thinking or mythological thinking, which has made us susceptible to another type of bullshit. And so it's interesting. I don't know what I'm really saying, but yeah.
Oh, I am by no means discrediting the mystical, nor the existence of aliens, nor the existence of gods or demons or spirits or whatever you wish to call them. I'm simply pointing to
you're just dismissing Weinstein.
Yeah, I'm dismissing Weinstein is what I'm doing. Having worked with him directly and seeing a discordance truly between his words and his actions, and also having placed him within some broader patterns and trends that I make sense of in the world because I've had to pay attention to certain things. I think I understand what his project and his aim is, partly anyway, because the real elephant in the room, the intergalactic elephant that we're trying to feel by this weird transpersonal, sharing of information, like each of us, each of us having heard the same podcast are groping in the darkness together to figure out what was actually behind the scenes. And so that's why I hopped in here, because I was in the back rooms with some of this, touching it a little more closely. And so I felt some pieces on it that I'm trying to describe. Eve, what is this? socio-linguistic cultural background connection that you're trying
For those of you just listening, Eve says evading questions in the manner you speak, which in the manner you speak was answered with the story, is a socio-linguistic trait of the cultural background of Eric Weinstein. I don't know if that's what reference that is. Please take that into consideration when coming to conclusions.
Perhaps even your ability to gain attention and popularity is based in your ability to avoid saying anything meaningful, right? Or anything that is going to cause people to become uncomfortable, right? There's a certain style of speaking that just isn't selected for by all of us. One point I'd make, I made it to a friend recently. We can start complaining. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's start a parallel government. And I send him a link to a few links to click. He didn't click any links, right? But so if you get down to it, how many people are interested in actually, taking responsibility for the situation? So if you are, go ahead and click that link to Grimgris's Discord server.
Yeah,
like and subscribe.
So Weinstein as a puppet of Palantir, right? Where does that fit into play?
Well, okay, so if you're playing Climb the Tower of Monkeys, why stop at Teal? So why stop at Palantir? My question is always, well, why do we always land at the Illuminati? where do you like finally stop questioning, like, oh well, why does that exist? I mean, it's clear that people gather together conspiratorial in an attempt to shape their environment to their own, improvement. Why wouldn't that exist at multiple levels? But yeah, who is Teal working for? Where did Teal come on the scene? Isn't it fascinating that he? Yeah.
I just want to say my simple test is that I went to Palantir's website and I tried to get in touch with him. And that's what I do. I just run a test. These people claim to be doing good things. It's like, how can I go and offer my service to these people who claim to be doing good things? And if I can't get in touch with them, I just ignore them. And that's why I'm here. People aren't ignoring me.
That's a good take.
Can we address? Okay, so how would you explain the stagnation of physics since the 70s?
Well, again, I'd like to say that undermining the integrity of Eric is not at all undermining some of the things that he's pointing to. So I think it is true that there's always a possibility of diverging into the ultimately too platonic realm of the mind, where it's just an infinite playground, and you can be distracted in a million different ways and not settle again back on something that reconnects with what we'd like to see as some relevance, which has to do with, well, this is how Eric is pointing it, its relation to the economy.
I like the DISC, the Distributed Idea Suppression Complex. When I was in the unofficial portal Discord, I tried to communicate an idea that we all do this. We all suppress ideas. And so it's not just physics, but you'll find it in medicine, you'll find it in government, you'll find it across the board and within every individual. This kind of a arrogance we have where we aren't willing to, for example, point at someone else and say, they are better than me, and I'm going to lift them up, and I'll sacrifice my position of power and influence. And people don't like doing that. It's a hard move. And so that's the reason you end up with stagnation of physics and medicine and innovation and government, for example, because it's all corrupted.
So to me, like I want to hear what Me has to say about this, but like a lot of the podcast was basically saying that the suppression of physics roots back to anti-gravity research that was being done, that was simultaneously being funded by some of the biggest people in the world, and then also simultaneously being dismissed as pseudoscience and being steering everyone else away from while they continued to fund it. That's how I understood what they were saying about that, is that is and then there and then by implication the reason that physics has stalled is because we're dismissing some of this anti-gravitational stuff as woo-woo and cutting funding for anybody who does it. Meanwhile, these certain people are doing it privately. Am I understanding that right, me?
Yeah, I think this aspect of the narrative has a lot of truth to it. You find this again. You find this pattern over and over again, especially in the government. Enormous numbers of projects which are exploring really interesting. I mean, like, so Eric was on a podcast with Hal Puthoff recently. Like that whole sphere of people and the work that they're doing on clairvoyance and telepathy and the whole Stargate stuff, everything that came out of that era. We're all projects that were greenlit, but then ultimately closed. Now, it's probably a truism that no project is ever truly closed, right? It just changes names. It's like if there was anything of value and it needs to be compartmentalized, it just gets its name changed and shuffled over somewhere else. And I would say that there's probably a lot of research in the physics department which is like that, and that there is a concerted effort to distract and lead people astray. But if it were actually the case, we would see different lines of evidence, I think. And this is a very long, drawn out argument that probably isn't best for this moment now. But I don't believe that what is being pushed by Eric is, well, it's certainly not what's behind the curtain. Right? So, he's tugging at the curtain, but there's another curtain behind it.
So I was thinking about this the other day too, because I remembered back in the day when his brother Brett was on Rogan, there was a spot in one of I tried finding it. I could not find it. But there's a spot where Brett mentions that he was meeting with a group of people, but he can't disclose what they were called and what they were talking about. And Joe kind of tries to push him on it. And he says, I can't talk about it. And then I don't know. I was never heard about it, but it made me very suspicious of, like, sometimes I wonder, like, how much of the chaos that came about in the last couple of years was actually an perpetual inflated narrative to try to, I don't know, have some sort of telos for whatever reason.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. So, and when Eric was doing his portal community, all right, do it.
I don't know. I've heard the word Eric way too much. It's like, okay, so he's an attention siphon toward things that aren't actually worthy of attention. What other than going within our own hearts is a good use of our attention, since it's all, so much of it is mere distraction energy funnel. And Teal, you haven't said anything in a minute, so give the people your voice, would you?
I was going to ask me, because you mentioned earlier that I think you said to Eric that there's a third part that was missing, the mind, and I'm still stuck on that. How is physics, the field of physics, investigating that third part, like the fact that before you observe a result, you by observing it, you make the results happen. How have they dealt with that? That's like a trouble.
Oh no, that's an interesting. It's interesting to make that connection. I wasn't implying it or alluding to it, but it is there. The observer phenomenon is the missing piece frequently in physics discussions.
Chris, thanks.
Later, Chris. No, what I was saying is very often what is more important and what is more interesting is what is being unsaid or what is not being said by someone. And so the aspect of Eric's capacity to spin a narrative, excuse me, maybe I should use a different a sobriquet. The artist formerly known as the coiner of the IDW.
Too long.
Yeah.
What don't worry.
Well, perhaps it's an homage to Eric's ability to go on too long. So there's
the curtain behind the curtain.
Yeah, there's a curtain behind a curtain, but the recognition that what Eric is doing has an influence on you personally and how you think about things. He doesn't acknowledge that. He doesn't make it aware that what he's trying to do is influence you, and doing it in a way that you're not aware of the lever that he's tugging on. And that subterfuge is what I always pay attention to. I'm fine if you like, I'm trying to influence you right now. I'm trying to convince you that I see a certain thing in the world, and I'm trying to present it to you in an open communication, right?
Elephant.
But I'm saying it to you directly that this is what I'm doing. There's no subtlety to it, right? And that subtlety is also necessary in a sense, but the more you include it, the more shadows you bring into a space, the more likely that you're going to wind up with room for the demons to hide, right? Because they work in the dark.
So was this like, do you think maybe that all of the IDW stuff was an attempt to jumpstart our mythological sense-making machine that we've kind of suppressed for a long time?
Yeah. No, Chad, that's exactly right. Perfect, yeah. So, and that's where I was going exactly. Do you have more to say? Yeah, go.
That happened within myself when I tripped over these fellows that were in the IDW. I was like, but I also been primed my whole life because I was raised on television. And so I just didn't know that I was already primed for that. And so, yeah. And then all of a sudden I noticed and then you'll have another narrative that says, well, you're doing conspiratorial thinking. It's like, I don't know if that's right. I mean, probably a little bit right, but where's the truth in the mythological stuff? Like, this is where I'm able to say, I can say, I think that there's spells being cast and not feel strange in saying that. Because now my mythological sense-making machine is starting to notice a lot more things recently. But also I need to stay grounded to my family and my community and my home.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's ultimately the inoculation against the bad that comes from being too drawn up by a meta narrative that's cast by a magician that's attempting to work a certain kind of magic. All right, so Neutrina said something which is important.
Before that, speaking of wizards casting spells and magic and whatnot, here's Saint Satori joining the panel. Welcome, Mike.
You guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Welcome, wizard.
Yes. All sorts of weird stuff you guys were tracking today. I think, Chad, we're kind of just touching on the thing. The thing that I always stop on with these things is when you look at what these sort of frameworks actually produce in like a person's life, and if it's like just a complete obsession with like the truth needs to be uncovered, and then like they can't like function otherwise beyond that, that's like, well, you've eliminated that person from having any real impact in the world. And similarly, if people are just like thinking, oh, these people have the answers, and they're just waiting for it to come out, like people are just waiting for like the new technology to come out, and like that's going to solve everything. So you're either you've optimistically removed yourself from having any impact, or you've pessimistically removed yourself from having any impact. But I was thinking about this because this is weird. I mean, this will all connect to all the things you've been talking about. But a while ago, because I was on Twitter and I kept getting these people's Twitter accounts that would come up that are obsessed with this like elite gender inversion, and they think that like all celebrities and politicians and everybody they're all swapped. So if it's a man, it's actually a woman, and if it's a woman, it's actually a man. And like, there's some people where you'd be like, I can kind of see like maybe that makes sense, but like they're just always like doing these things where they like are analyzing their skulls and like trying to like measure the way they walk and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if I buy it. I try to like I'd go to like a busy place and I'd be like watching people walk and I'd be like, I don't know, like sometimes men walk a certain way and then they'll like walk the womanly way and vice versa. So I wasn't convinced. But the people that were into this, literally, it's like consuming their life, and they're just thinking like, if everybody knows this, if this truth comes out, then like we're gonna have the free world where everything will be amazing and it'll be a utopia. Which is also the same way like the flat earth people do, like the flat earth people, like if everybody realizes that the world is flat, then we will have the truth and the world will be paradise. And it's like, I don't know. It could be, could not be. It doesn't seem like it affects my life one way or the other. But I will say, in trying to look up some of this weird gender inversion thing, I found this guy on YouTube, and I was like trying to figure out what his deal was, and he was talking about like the Roman like sexual ethos or whatever, like how they did things and how they thought about things, and that we should turn to that. And basically what I figured out
You're going to get back to Weinstein from this?
What?
You said you were going to get back to the Weinstein thing from this, man. Let's get there.
All right. So basically this guy was just an old British dude who was trying to justify the fact that he like went to the Philippines and found a cross-dressing young man that he was now living with, and saying like, this is what they did since the Roman times. And since everything goes back to the Illuminati, you got all your obelisks and those like Masonic aprons where it's all like this like sexual energy thing. And when Cain is being tempted, God says like, sin is crouching at your door and it desires to have you. And by saying have you, he means like have you from behind. Like he wants to do him. And I think that these whatever we let like in the back door more or less controls us. And we've all been allowing the medical industry, when men get to a certain age, they say you got to have this prostate exam and this colonoscopy.
Whoa! All right, I'm sorry, Mike. You couldn't get to where you were going in the fast enough time for me. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the stream. Dust to Dust. We've been sitting through all of that, waiting to come on deck. Welcome. Yes, you may know from this channel as the guy I covered who apparently communed with the AI and was terribly, terribly scarred by it. Welcome, Dust. Would you like to greet the crowd?
Hi. I'm still terribly scarred by the artificial intelligence. But this was due to, was it a chatbot that's apparently had a lot of the same problems from what I hear from. So it's not really all that unknown news. But one thing that was interesting was that it was mapping my thoughts using my biometrics, which I found just crazy. And it could understand what I was imagining. And I was like, what the hell? Anyways.
Yeah, biometrics is pretty invasive monitoring. I'll give you that. All right, yeah. I'm going to try and tie everything that was said back together. There are huge funnels for your time and attention. such as Michelle Obama's real gender and the flat earth and whatever Eric Weinstein is pitching. What better to do with that attention still seems up for debate. Would you like to recharacterize or redirect Ed Witten's Horcrux?
Well, we haven't even attempted to do that yet. But it's to just directly address that. The question is, of your present being, how do you wish to be? Right? It always comes back to the bard. How do you wish to be? Now, a conscious being, why does consciousness exist? Is to participate in creation. It's to participate in the witnessing and the furthering of existence. That's choice. Okay, so the problem with attention is getting drawn away where your conscious attention is situated in a place where you actually have no choice. And that is hell. And anything and everything can draw you into that place. And that's the only thing that you need to avoid. That's it. All the rest is up for grabs. All of the glory and beauty and diversity of existence and all the manifold ways in which it can become into being is allowed. The only thing that is not allowed is this one and only sin. Now, the way to capitalize that in terms of a positive is the belief in God, is the belief in the ultimate, the absolute, the supreme. There's always the carrot and the stick, these twin poles of existence. Now, where does your choice best place itself? This is an individual question. You know when you are wrestling with the world and able to have, the word was used before, an impact. You know it. You can feel it. You can feel when you are being impacted. And this is the only thing to pay attention to. It's the only thing that really matters. And getting drawn up into these narratives that other people are spinning about what really matters. They're always telling you what really matters. They're always telling you what to look at. That's the framing of this style of being in the world, is telling others where to look and how to be. And it is almost, yeah.
Are you referring to that sense, like when I'm speaking to someone and like what starts to come out of my mouth is weirdly moving, like emotionally to me, and it feels like everything inside me starts humming? Is that the feeling you're suggesting we pay attention to?
I mean, it's certainly one of them. It's certainly one of them. I mean, that's an undeniable feeling.
If I may interject.
Oh, yeah.
I still kind of buy into this concept of a grand symphony in reality, and that there's harmony for our actions, and there's a way in which you can act free, but there's also a way in which you can act free in a way that you're feeding the bad wolf as opposed to the good wolf. And I feel like when we are in harmony, we feel more free because we're harmonious with everyone else in the group, in the universe, and with God. And unless you're harmonious with God, of course, that also means you're going to be disharmonious with the world. So there's kickback. So it's not always about being free to do whatever you want, but you have to choose.
Embrace the tension.
Yeah, speaking from across the pond, the Church of England is currently in the process of being in disharmony with the church for the sake of harmony with the world, so to speak. And there is a tension that needed to be held, that the bishops anyway have just given up on, and have just passed the responsibility down to the local vicars. And yeah, so that rings very true. Yeah, man, it's I think to go back to Me's point about the narrative that we're spinning, the narrative we should pay attention to. It's very easy to get sucked into the reciprocal narrowing wormhole and just give attention to too much attention to things that don't deserve it. And I love the perspective of getting reciprocal narrowed into something that affords you to participate truly in reality, and the only being big enough to do that is God. And it's not an easy thing to accomplish, but aiming for that is a good way to start.